Let's make a new page. It's called welcome page. So let's start off by doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into the code. And in this source folder, I'm going to make a new file. And I'm going to call it welcome page. So it's another component, .jsx. And I could just call it welcome. It doesn't have to be welcome page. Welcome.jsx. And welcome and .jsx is JavaScript with JSX, essentially. So it's just going to make us a React page. So instead of saying, you could do .js, but JSX then actually gives us this little icon, which shows us that it's a JavaScript. Shows us that it's a React page, which actually makes it a bit more easier then to kind of look through your files. And we're going to import, we're going to want our styling, so we're going to bring in our app.css styling. And we're going to import React from React. All right. And we're going to have our function. It's going to be called welcome page. Here we can call it welcome page. We're going to pass in props, because remember, that's how we actually get the username information. And then we're going to return, and we can just have an empty. This is just like to return. You need to have a div statement, but you don't even need to write div. So you could just put this in to then return. This is JSX. It's a little confusing. It's just an empty open tag. And you just need to have that in your return statement if you're going to bring in some HTML, which we're going to do. So we're going to have h1 welcome to the game. And what do we want? Well, we want to pass the props of the username. So we're going to say props.username, if I can spell correctly. Username. Okay, we're going to save this. And the final thing we want to do then is we want to export this function. And so at the very bottom here, what we can do is we can say export default, because it's like a module. We're going to call it welcome page. Oops, welcome page. Proper convention here, uppercases, right? Let's save this. And now this is a function. It's a functional component that we can then integrate into our app. So I could go back to app.js and now integrate this. How would I integrate it? Well, the first thing I want to do is import it like a library. So I'm going to say import welcome page from welcome. So it's going to know automatically we're grabbing it from the file. Notice we don't need to specify the file type. And now in our return statement, what we could do first just to see if it's working is we can say welcome to the game, but instead of welcome to the game here, we could actually replace this h1. We're going to have welcome page here, and we're going to pass in all the props. So we do, this is just a spread operator for our props, and we're going to set username to equal username and close the tag. Now, if I save this and we go to our Chrome, we're going to see that props is not defined, and we have to go back up to the function app. And I forgot to actually, you have to actually let the functional component app know that there's going to be props as an argument. These are like the properties that we want to pass, right? What we want to be passing. All right, so let's save that. Let's go back to Chrome. And now, if I were to refresh, let's get a new instance. Welcome to the game, nothing. If I put in a username, Ron, we see that we get Ron. The password Ron, I click submit. We see Ron is added to the database. Let's check if that actually happened. So let's go into our data cloud over here. Let's see if we got Ron. I'm going to refresh to the bottom, and we see we have Ron. Amazing. So now we're passing properties in React client side. Now, are we routing? No, we haven't actually set up routing, but we do have this new functional component, and it's working. Not only is it working, it's also updating the client side. Very, very good. Let's stop right here. Any questions that you may have, please ask ChatGPT. Of course, ask the Q&A in Udemy as well. I'll see you in the next video for more. Okay, see you there. Bye-bye. So we have props set up to username. So every time I change the username, it gets updated over here. But that's not what we want, right? What we actually want, well, render the welcome page. Once we hit submit, and then it gets rendered over, and then we get the game. We don't want the full game to be updated right away before we hit submit, because that's not much of a username, because that's not much of an authentication, right? If the whole game's already there, why do you even need to put in a username or password to begin with? It's just not going to make a lot of sense. So if we go back into our build an app, we see here that we have the function. This is basically what we did. But then I asked it, if you remember, given the following code, we want to add logic so we can route to a different page when we submit the form. And then it started to say, well, you can use things like browser router and the React DOM. And then you can wrap it up, and then you can link to different paths. So it even has the use history here, which doesn't work anymore. So given this code, let's go through it and write it together. So there's a few things we want to have, right? We want to have React Router DOM. So let's install it. So let's just install it to make sure it's there. So I'm going to go into the, we're going to go into another instance here. So we've got this running, full stack app. We're going to cd into my app, right? So let's go into my-app from full stack. Here I'm going to install React Router DOM. And then it says it's saying we should bring in the browser router. Now, there's a few ways you could always wrap the browser router. We could wrap it around the app, but it makes more sense to bring it into the index, because the index is where we render the app. So what I'm going to do is in our index over here, we're going to bring in the browser router. It's just a smarter way to do it. So we're going to say browser router from React Router DOM. The other way would work as well. But of course, if you kept asking ChatGPT about best practices, you could eventually figure out, well, maybe it's going to make sense to figure out my routing of the browser over here. And we're going to wrap around here the browser router, and save that. Okay, great. So now we brought in the browser router. Let's go back to our app and actually write code so we can render this page when we submit the button. So how do we do that? Well, remember how they have use history? It says here, you want to use history, and then you can use the use history hook from the router DOM, which you can navigate to a new route. We could also use redirect if we wanted to. Let's see how we could use this use history. You see it's history.push. Now, use history has been changed with use navigate. And then use navigate, you don't even have to push, it's implied, so you just put in where you want it to go. So I'll show you how this code would work. What you'd want to do is go back to Visual Studio Code, and we're going to bring in a couple things. We're going to bring in use navigate, which is the use history. We're going to bring in route, because we're going to have routes set up, and routes. You need route for routes. You would run into errors, and you know what? ChatGPT didn't figure that out right away because it's just giving an example. But of course, you could plug it in, and then it'll say it doesn't work. Then you say why it doesn't work. It'll show you routes for routing, because routes is going to have to be the parent of route. So what do I mean by that? Well, when we fire this handle submit button, when we follow the form, that's when we want to route. That's when we want to navigate to another page. So in order to do that, what we can do is create a new variable here, constant navigate. They did the same thing but use history, or ChatGPT did. But we're going to use navigate instead, because that actually works. And then under here, the log, where instead of pushing with use history, we're just going to navigate to some endpoint. And we're going to create this endpoint. It's going to be called just welcome for the welcome page. Okay? Now, we actually need to have a path for the welcome page. And we can do that by setting up route paths. So in our return statement, underneath our class, you know we have this welcome page here. What we're going to do is we're going to wrap everything in our routes. So we're going to create routes. And then we can have routes in our route. We can have individual routes, excuse me. So we're going to have different routes. And each route's going to be a self-closing tag, actually. So here we could have different paths. So we could say one path can be set up to the welcome page. All right. And we're going to do an element. And the element is basically what component for our welcome page path do we want to bring in. And here, we really want this whole welcome page. So what I can do is I can copy this welcome, delete it, and insert it into our element. And this is just for JSX. That's why for JavaScript, that's why we use this curly brace. All right. And now we have a path for welcome. Now, the last thing we want to do is for this form on submit, we want to also add that action for the welcome. So I'm going to say action/welcome. Now, if we save this, and we go back to Google Chrome, and we refresh, notice how there's no welcome anymore. Now, if I type in a user, if we say we want, let's say we want Goku, and Goku's password is going to be Kamehameha, and I hit submit, boom, we changed the page. Notice we rendered a new page, the welcome page. Welcome to the game, Goku. Amazing. All right, so this is working. It's fantastic. Now, there is one big problem here. I don't know if you noticed. If you look in our developers, we're seeing this weird error: no routes matched, no routes matched, no routes. Now, it's telling us this because it's worried when we're firing on our form and we fire it off, that what's happening here, and here, let me actually refresh. Let's go back so we can clear it so you can see. When I fire off over here, it's like, well, there's no actual route path for the slash, and this is our default, and it's not. And that's a bad thing. You want to set up a default path for what the default slash would be, because this is our 3001. So it's telling us, hey, you can't just leave it like that. And it's right. So what we'd want to do here is underneath route paths, you know what? Let's just ask ChatGPT, since this course does show a lot of things with ChatGPT. But we can say, let's go to ChatGPT, let's copy this error and say, how come in our routes in the React code above, we are receiving the following warning in our developer tools? And then we can paste this: no routes, matched location. Let's see what ChatGPT has to say about this. I'm going to scroll to the bottom, and I'll drink some coffee and wait for our favorite robot to guide us. So the warning no routes matched means that none of the routes defined in your React app match the current location. So this happens if you haven't defined a route for the route path. And we never did. Make sure you have defined. Now it's also telling you other things for the warning. Make sure you define the one for game. In our case, it's not game, right? They gave us the game example, but it's welcome. This is you having to think a little bit, right? But here they say, well, listen, set up a path for route exact. You can do a link to. We're not doing links. Make sure the path prop of the route component matches the current location of the app. The route will not be displayed. Okay, some good advice. But essentially, focus on this. This can happen if we don't define a route for the path, and we didn't, right? So here, in order to fix this error, we can actually copy paste the code here and change a path, create another route for the default. And here, we can just put back what we had before, which was our H1, right? Do you remember we just had an H1 header that just said welcome to the page? So I can put this back, and in here I can say welcome to the game. If I save this now, and we go to Chrome and we refresh, the error is gone. And we see welcome to the game. If I add a new user, so let's say we want Bulma to come hang out with Goku, her password's going to be, I don't know, cookies, and I click submit, welcome to the game, Bulma, and we change to the welcome page. User path database updated, routing changing, everything except for authentication. If you want to figure out how to add express authentication with Passport.js and Google login, Facebook login, or even Auth0, I have a whole course on that, which I think you would love. And you can probably use that course to actually add the authentication to this app if you wanted to, because it does exactly that. But it works. Amazing. And it works with routing. We did it. Guys, we did it. Congratulations. We did it. We did it thanks to you. We can even say here to the ChatGPT, thank you for all your wonderful help so far! Exclamation. Let's see what it says. You're welcome. I'm glad that I could help. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm here to help. Do you want to hang out later and drink some coffee with me? Let's see what it says. As an AI, I do not have the ability to physically meet or drink coffee. Well, that's unfortunate because it's really missing out. However, I'm always here to help you. Well, it's a very nice AI. Well, we appreciate the work. Great work making it this far, everybody. I think we're now ready to get the game going for Connect 4. Now, what we're going to do in the next section is going to be a little different. I have a code for Connect 4 that you're going to download and then add to our repository. Now, we could get ChatGPT to build the entire game Connect 4 step by step, as we've been doing so far. It would take a very long time because Connect 4 has a lot of elements to it to get it to work. But I think you already get the gist. In fact, I'd encourage you after this course to build your own Connect 4 using ChatGPT or your own game. It doesn't even have to be Connect 4, Tetris, whatever you want to build, just build it. And then show us in the Discord what you built. That's the beauty, that's the power of being a developer and working with tools like AI to enhance your coding development, right? But instead, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on debugging, because when you get developer jobs, junior positions, intermediate positions, you're not always going to start a whole project from scratch and you get hired by a new startup and they're like, duh, we don't know. Usually in many cases, you already want to join a company that's done something. They're already going to have huge code bases. You're going to go in there and it's going to be overwhelming. There's going to be a lot of code. Sometimes you have to debug. So for the final part of this course, we're going to look at code that's broken and we're going to use ChatGPT. It's going to be hundreds of lines of code. And with hundreds of lines of code, we're going to use ChatGPT to fix it and to get this app working. So I hope you're as excited as I am to do that. And after that, you can congratulate yourself because you've built an entire application with MongoDB, full stack, MERN, with Express, with all the top technologies that are used by the top companies in the world. And I hope you see the power in all of this and the potential. Okay, great work. Whenever you're ready, I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.